2026 IBM Marketplace Survey results. Yes, hard to believe it's year 12. How did that go by so fast? A dozen years of bringing information to the ecosystem around our beloved IBM operating system, and of course the hardware that it runs on, the IBM Power platform. Very excited to be with you today. This session is being recorded. There will also be a PDF that's downloadable, ungated, on the Fortra website, as always, along with the recording from this webinar. If you want more insight from Kris, Timothy, and Steve, I highly recommend listening to the recording. Last year we had 270 people filled out the survey. This year we had 315, so a little improvement there. And you will learn that these are customers all over the globe, different industries, different size companies, developers, administrators, CIOs have all filled out the survey. So really good, diverse group of people that have done it. And then finally, I have to have a shout out to my own marketing team, Josh, Elizabeth, Lindsay. We couldn't do it every year without you. We really appreciate it, and we appreciate the help from our guests today, in Kris, Timothy, and Steve. They are all icons in the IBM world, and I guess first over to Steve Will to introduce himself on what he does for the IBMI community.
All right, glad to be here again. I think this is my 8th time doing this. I'm the chief architect of the platform, so I'm the development person who is assigned responsibility for the plan and the strategy. And as the CTO, I got to look at all the parts of our business and figure out what technologies we need to invest in. So glad to be here. We'll move it on to whoever's next.
All right, since I'm in order, I'll just go next. Tom Huntington, I'm our EVP of Technical Solutions. Been with Fortra Help Systems. That's our heritage for now 37 plus years. I work with a lot of our large customers, work with our different business partners around the globe, and understanding what their needs are in cybersecurity, automation. I'm also an IBM champion, and great program. If you don't know about that program, take a look at it. IBM does an awesome job of providing the champion program. So excited to be here with that. And then over to Kris Whitney. Kris, what do you do for IBM? And our new team member, a round of applause for Kris being, I think, voluntold to show up here, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
he did it.
I'm super excited. First year, that I got invited and the opportunity to be on this call. I'm the IBMI chief engineer. What I basically do is help Steve fulfill what he comes up with, or what we come up with as a team, and build it. And just a little background, I do come from emphasis in infrastructure enablement, I'll call it broadly, whether that be cloud, automation, virtualization, those type of technologies are kind of my background, but I try and pull it all together and help Steve that way.
Thank you, Kris. It's an honor to have you with us today. So looking forward to many more down the road. Timothy, over to you.
Yeah, I'm a co-editor along with Alex Woody of the 400, which is the publication that follows this platform at IT Jungle. I've been doing this. This is going to be entering year 37, which is hard to imagine. I'm quite pleased that we've been able to do this so long in various forms. I started out on paper and mailing stuff a million years ago, and you know, the internet came along and changed everything, but here we are still at it, and I'm pretty sure we're going to have a good year. So I look forward to serving the community, and so does Alex.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you, Timothy. And I used to have a filing cabinet full of all those newsletters, but I hate to say it, I've gotten rid of them.
I kept one copy of each.
Well, that makes sense.
I threw them out too.
All right. Well, let's get started. You know, I like to remind everybody that the community here on IBMI is hardly stagnant. Every year there's changes that come, and last year 2025 was definitely one of those very busy years. Of course, we had the 11th annual IBMI Marketplace Survey in January. In April, we saw a new operating system release from IBM Rochester. Thank you very much. IBM 7.6. Common Europe in Sweden last year in June. We had Common US also in, I went over that a little fast, in Anaheim, California. And then we got new hardware, Power 11 in July. Thank you, Austin, Texas, home of the Power processor and design. We had Common in the fall, the Navigate in Pittsburgh in September. We had IBM Tech Exchange in Orlando this year, a big conference for all customers of IBM. And of course, with that, how could we forget about Bob being announced for AI? Bob, is no longer just a construction person. He is a construction person that takes on development activity, I think is where we're going with that. And then November, we had TR7 for 7.5 and TR1 for 7.6. So very busy year around the IBM I operating system. Any other things that I missed amongst our team members here today?
We had the first ever Common Japan that was also in June of last year. And I think the first organized Common India, though that might have been, anyway, lots of common.
We have a lot in common. Okay. All right. Nobody's ever heard that before. All right. So what is your responsibility on IBM I? We have a little polling question coming up. We want to learn what your background is, what you do for the platform. Are you a developer on IBM I, a manager of IBM I, team members, a business partner of IBM I, new to IBM I? So there might be some of you that are just listening in here today to find out more about this platform that has been around, since the really System 38, but we can say AS400 in June of 1988, evolving over time. So Steve, I know just last week you did a webinar with Tech Channel. What was that about?
Well, there's going to be a whole series of webcasts that are related to, if you're new to IBM I, where do you get information? If you're looking for new people for IBM I, how do you go about finding the right kind of person? And then how do you help them become productive? So we kicked that off last week. It was a good session. Linda Elk here, who works in IBM with making sure that we help support both schools and community groups like user groups, is kind of the MC of all that. It was a really good session.
Yeah, it sounded, and it's out there for replay. Just go out to Tech Channel and find it. I Googled it this morning and found it pretty easily. So speaking of what your responsibilities are from this first polling question, 20% of you are developers on IBM I, 32% are the managers, which is great to have you along with us. 23% business partners. Of course, you guys are responsible for keeping this ecosystem going, so thank you. And the people who keep the system going, the administrators, 23%. And then, of course, we have some new people with us, 3%. So thank you all for answering that polling question. And let's keep moving along here, kind of jump through. This is our agenda today. We're going to talk about what we got from the survey in the data center, IT initiatives, outlook for IBM I. I'll share some of the demographics from the survey at the end, along with Steve, and then just a little bit on Fortra. So let's jump right into it and get into the first slide here. Tim, let's have you go first here and talk about what's in the data center, why we have this makeup of partitions, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. This chart, as you can see, doesn't really change a lot year to year. And I say this, I think, often. I'm comforted by the fact that it doesn't change very much, but I will say that in general, the number of partitions continues to go up, and that means that people are using the partitioning technology that is at the heart of this platform. And we've been at this longer than all the other major commercial platforms, except the mainframe, of course. So OS400 was the first platform to get this technology, so it doesn't surprise me that these shops, many of them have tons of partitions on boxes. It has allowed a certain amount of server consolidation over the years, so we find that there's fewer and fewer sites that have multiple machines. They might have an HA backup machine locally, but it used to be that you'd have a development machine and you'd have a backup machine for the production stuff, and you'd have another machine that you had a spare laying around to do something else. So this technology has allowed people to get fewer boxes, do more stuff with them, and that's always easier to keep current. Fewer boxes to manage is better than many boxes to manage.
Very true, very true. Kris, what are your thoughts on this?
A couple thoughts. First of all, I want to, this data is always very valuable. Even though I haven't been on this call before, we steal this information and use it widely. But some kind of level setting on how I use this and interpret it. Looking at it a little bit on the one server, one partition boxes, we actually know we have a lot of customers still in that mode, and maybe not necessarily the ones that would be targeted to answer the survey. So maybe that one's a little different than what the survey data would represent here. So I do see a lot of that. To Timothy's observation about consolidation, we've always seen that as a value prop. Is back in the day we did LPARs and virtualization, and that kind of hits my heart, where I've been working on that for a long time. So we're seeing that. And then from an availability standpoint, it's actually kind of interesting on the trend or the debate within the industry on whether you do that, where you put more eggs in your basket, or do you actually spread it out for different failure domains. But I think we still see the trend as a consolidation, cost savings operationally is. So it's good to see that. It's good to see, that we do scale to these, hundreds of participants.
And I think some people outside the community don't realize how virtualized in the IBM operating system and the server is itself. And we've had partitioning around since 1999, believe it or not. It's been quite a while, 27 years now. So, the other thing people are worried about is, are we keeping current on the operating system? And Steve, if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about this one.
Sure. If you look, this really represents our 3-year major release cycle really well, right? We introduced 7.6 last year. It says that the people who answered this survey, and it was open in the fall of last year, only 3% of them had gone to that major release. But that means that most, like the high percentage of our clients, are on the other 2 releases that are supported. And of course, since we allow people to jump up over, from 1 release to 2 above it, it's perfectly fine that there are the 2 most recent releases that are dominating the marketplace. If you look 3 years earlier, it was very much the same for the releases that were there when we introduced 7.6 or 7.5, sorry. So anyway, it's a good pattern to have. Of course, we always have a few people who are on those older releases. We support them in extended mode for quite some time for clients who really need that. I think probably there are customers out there on prior releases to that who don't have support but are still relying on this platform, and you're welcome too. Hopefully we can help you get moved forward.
Excellent. Tim, what do you think about this slide?
Well, as I've said before in my analysis at the 400, that I think that there's a fairly large base, and it's subject to debate, of people that have, for whatever reason, and mostly it's because their applications are either from a vendor that's no longer around, or they're on a release that has long since fallen out of support for their applications. They fall behind in the operating system. So, I think that those little light blue bars are probably a little bit bigger than this data suggests. But, the kind of people who read the 400, who take surveys, who keep current and stay on maintenance, I call those the actives in the base, and there are laggards in the base. And we're always talking to the actives, and I think it's important we all serve them, right? That's what we're doing. And the laggards, we try to serve them, but they're back there, and we try to do what we can to encourage them to come forward, and hopefully that will happen. There's always that desire, but I think there's always something back there.
And Stephen, this is the current IBMI roadmap. Any things you want to share on that?
Oh, just this pattern will continue for, there's no reason to believe it will never it will ever change beyond that. We're always doing something new. We're always going to have major releases, though we do most of our function in between releases now. And you can live on any given release with its technology refreshes being added onto it for years and years. That's what the support roadmap tries to show. So it's just a consistency that I think everybody can count on.
Exactly. And, you know, a lot of times these operating systems are around 10, 11 years. That's pretty standard, right?
Yep, that's exactly right.
Yeah, the operating system can last longer than the hardware.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yep, there we go. Well, speaking of the hardware, Tim, great lead into that. What do you think about staying current on the hardware and what's happening there?
Well, I think that all customers of servers, including hyperscalers and cloud builders these days, are trying to stretch their hardware as long as they can for very good and sound accounting reasons. You know, none of this stuff is cheap, and AI servers in particular are very expensive. They're the most expensive computers I've ever seen. So, you know, I think it's ironic that we've always behaved this way. You know, it's not unusual to have a machine in the field for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And the great thing about it is that IBM does a good job in supporting the back releases of the operating system and also the hardware as you need to. You do hit a wall eventually, right? So, you know, I think that Power 10 is a very big upgrade moment. And Power 11, you know, a lot of the stuff that was supposed to be in Power 11 ended up in Power 10. So it's not fair to say that Power 11 is not a big deal. It's like, no, you got the benefit of Power 11 3 years ago, most of it anyway. So that's what happened with Power 10. And so the jump to Power 9, Power 8, not nearly as big. There's a lot of functionality in Power 10 and then Power 11. So I think we're going to see a hardware upgrade cycle coming because people have been hanging back a little bit. And I don't think the 3% in 2026 for the late 2025 survey data is a fair reflection of what's going to happen with Power 11. And it really depends on what the availability is of Power 10 machines. Now, one last thing, IBM is building to order now. So there's no barns full of Power 10 sitting there waiting to be discounted. So we'll see what happens. But, you know, I encourage people to get current when they can and stay current because it's dangerous not to.
Kris, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I'll just follow up where Timothy was going with that. Our strategy is definitely trying to make it as frictionless as possible for people to stay current, whether that's the operating system or hardware. So a lot of the technologies that we've had and continue to enhance kind of tell that story in Power 11. If you're kind of on the larger side, we did a bunch of work around, you know, live partition mobility, automation, and some other things to make those upgrades. Migrate While Active is another technology that came out in the Power 11 timeframe to make that upgrade to Power 11 a lot easier, even for smaller customers. And so we were really focused on making that, you know, as frictionless as possible. Power 11 wasn't, from a hardware horsepower and speeds and feeds and traditional things, you know, the same type of hardware, you know, release and hardware that, you know, maybe traditionally like Power 10 was, but it does inherit all the Power 10 and then gets a bonus. But what we really tried to do is focus maybe on kind of the softer part of the experience of the Power Server and Power 11, which might not be as obvious when you just look at, you know, one page on that we're used to just on speeds and feeds. But I think you'll see that going forward to our focus on usability and other things in our power generations. So it's not just about hardware.
Yeah, so then it's important to look at the support roadmap for the hardware versus the operating system. Any thoughts on this, Kris?
Well, what you're seeing is, you know, if you look, there's some customers on some older hardware, so we're definitely probably going to see a upgrade or a bump, you know, in Power 11s as some of these OS releases kind of go into play. You're going to start seeing that obviously on, you know, 7.2, 7.3 as those go into life in April, and then 7.4 is on extended support, and those type of things will drive people to do upgrades, which then have a dependency obviously on the hardware that's it's supported on. But that's a good thing to, you know, and like I said before, we want to make this as frictionless as possible, but it's good to keep updated and get all the latest and greatest. As Steve said, we try and put things, you know, in backwards in releases, but we don't go all the way back to, you know, obviously the unsupported releases. So, you know, staying in that sweet spot of supported releases gives you the best kind of flexibility going forward.
Very good. Yeah, it's good to see 3 levels of OS support on Power 11 with starting with 7.4.
This pattern has been here forever. It's like it's no surprise to anybody. You know, there's a very regular pattern with some wiggles for hardware now, and the software has been like this as long as I can remember.
Yeah. Well, one of the questions that we asked this year was, what's your plans for upgrades in 2026 as you look at your crystal ball of software, hardware upgrades? And Tim, thoughts on this one?
Well, I like to see when the hardware and the software are adding up, and you know, the percentage of people who are saying no is about consistent with what we generally see. And this, you know, this chart doesn't change all that much. It wiggles a few percent one way or the other, but I guess the most important thing is that people are going to be spending some money, and there's always a percentage of the base, and you know, pick a number, 1 out of 10, you know, 1 out of 20, whatever it is, 1 out of 5. You know, if it's a 7-year cycle, you know, you can do the math. Should be looking to do something. So, you know, this is a good, steady, healthy business, and we all want that to be true, because that means IBM will continue to invest in it. And that means that customers can continue to rely on the platform. So if these numbers were any different, if I saw something, if that no was a lot bigger, I'd be nervous. And it's about where it always is. So
hopefully some of those no's are the ones that are already upgraded.
Yeah.
Well, there's
Exactly.
yes, of course.
Yeah.
What do you think, Steve?
Yeah. To parrot what Timothy said, but a little differently, we expect that when a customer has moved in 2025, either you know, when they've gotten both their platform and their operating system to sort of whatever their most current is, they're going to sit there for a year. And then they're going to have to start looking, do I need to go to the next one, or in hardware or software? So having that 30% pause is never a concern for us. And so it's actually interesting to me that over time, people have been more and more willing to do both hardware and software in the same year. I think back to the years when people would do hardware one year and then software the next year, just because they were concerned about the disruption. But as Kris keeps talking about, we try to make it as frictionless as possible anymore. And so we're trying to make that, sure, 30% can say no, but we want to make it possible for people to go both hardware and software without problems. And it's nice to see that's the biggest part of the pie.
And that 30%, by the way, implies that amongst these active customers, they do it every 3 years.
Yep, it sure does.
That's a much faster cycle than I think is historically true for the base as a whole. So the actives are active, okay, and the inactives are really inactive.
So we know IBMI is generally never just by itself, although some customers say they only use IBMI. Steve, what are your thoughts about what's alongside the IBMI server?
Yeah,
operating system?
This is what we would expect anymore. Again, we've been doing this for a long time. We remember the days when there were hardly any IBMI clients doing Linux. Now half the clients have Linux in their enterprise. That makes perfect sense. I always get to this chart and say I'm so happy to run into those IBMI only people, the ones in the 15 to 17%, and I run into them at conferences and at user groups a lot, because they are the most passionate members of our platform, always asking us to do more. But I do want them to understand that there will be things that they can get first, for example, on Linux, maybe on a Linux partition on Power, that will lag for a while on IBMI. If you really want to adopt some AI stuff, you can do some really good stuff on IBMI, but there is even more you can do next to IBMI and then integrate it with it. So don't think that you have to do everything on IBMI only. Again, glad to see those people who do, but yeah.
Very good. And then I know, Kris, you work a lot with the cloud. What are your thoughts on where the state of the cloud is and IBMI workloads today?
Yeah, there's a couple of thoughts. So if we just looked at the Fortra survey from the last couple of years, the total between hybrid and cloud only has been pretty steady. What's kind of changed slightly is the number of people that are doing just cloud services that is, ticked up. And what I see in the industry was actually interesting working with IBM Cloud, where we see a lot of people using IBM Cloud as a migration. So they're getting out of their data center, so everything's going there. But what I see is a lot of people, and it's maybe not, quite taken into consideration in this question, is using cloud services. And that's the part of the market that is really expanding quickly, whether that's, using, a specific IBMI example is around using it for your backups and cloud object storage, and using our ICC product to duplicate your tapes. And we have a great, I don't think it's a formal customer reference, but anecdotal story, we had a customer actually had a flood and had to recover from the cloud because they lost all their physical tapes in the flood, and they were able to do that in 24 hours just from copying their tapes up to the cloud. So that's just a great story. We've been trying to, talk about that story for years to actually see someone. It's unfortunate for the customer that they had to recover, but it actually worked. But I do see it growing, both the lock, stock, and barrel, migrating everything to the cloud to get out of a data center, and the hybrid where you're utilizing services or you're using it for your DR target. That's going to be a huge growth pattern, probably starting in 26.
And I think, again, in the IBMI community, we don't move maybe as fast as other technology companies because of the reliability, stability of the platform that people have learned to rely on, right? So it certainly impacts that. Tim, what are your thoughts on cloud and IBMI?
I think in the long run, hybrid should be 75%. I think that's where we're headed, and you'll find very few on-premises only and maybe the same amount of cloud only. So, there's no reason at this point, with the various ways you can do offsite data protection and high availability clustering, you should always have redundant local and mirror it out to another site. We know that. So, for the kind of industries where IBMI dominates, in banking, finance, insurance, healthcare, they have to do these things. So, and this part of the base will represent, they will be well represented in this part of the base, those customers. So I think in the long run, there's no reason not to do hybrid for those use cases. And then we'll talk about whether or not, they're going to put their code assist out in a cloud and not run that locally and other things with AI. We'll see how that shakes it out. But I can't imagine, given the price performance of some of these offerings compared to what it was 10 years ago, that you wouldn't have that backup and recovery out in the cloud.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of cloud, and the next topic being HA, certainly comes into play. Kris, does this kind of meet IBM's expectation on HA technologies, backups, those kinds of things?
So I think it meets what we see out there in the industry now. If I just kind of look at the data, and from a personal perspective, recovery from high availability, 62%. Personally, I'm going to say everyone needs high availability, but that's just from a purist standpoint. So I think we got some room to grow. So that's great. There's great opportunity out there. Kind of the shifts in tape and VTLs. Over time we're seeing that go down, but the interesting thing is physical tape is still a strong player out in the industry, and we still see that. VTL is kind of coming up, and a lot of that makes it a lot easier to move your backups off your data center, because we still have a lot of practices from probably the 90s where storing your tapes in your closet on the same data center isn't probably the best practice. So we're starting to see some modernization and thinking around the backups, and the 11% on the cloud one, that's great to see, people starting to utilize cloud. I think Timothy's right. That should be way higher than it is. There's not, a lot of reason not to look at that. And then the 1% saying none, that's a little scary, but I'm glad it's down there at 1.
There's always a few out there, right? Yeah, when I think of this this slide here and the results from it, to me it's amazing in 2026, and there's still people doing a lot with tape yet. But if you think about it, it's immune to ransomware, so that's maybe not the worst thing in the world. The other thing that jumps out at me always is if you run IBMI, you have options, And the other thing is, we know customers are successful when they do their HA tests, their roll swaps, their recovery from tape. It's always been kind of a benefit to running this kind of integrated operating system with database, that if you follow good practices, you're going to be able to recover the system, you know, in a reasonable point of time, depending upon what technology you have. So ultimately, that's probably the most important message from here, is that you have options and you can be successful in building out a solution around backup and recovery, HA, DR, whatever you want to call it. Let's turn our attention now to the next part of the survey, which was really looking at IT initiatives. What were your top concerns? And we allowed the survey respondents to select 5. I used to be able to select all of them, but we narrowed it down to 5 over the last probably 6-7 years. And so it's always interesting to see where this has moved. The last 9 years, cybersecurity was #1. So it was a surprise to me this year. Wow, cybersecurity is #2. What do you think about that, Steve?
All right, so I could talk about this chart for way too long. So let me get the key points.
Yeah.
If you look at those top 5 and the fact that cybersecurity has gone down to #2, and you remember back to when high availability was #1, it isn't so much that people don't think those things are important. In my experience talking to people, it means that they are more satisfied that they have an answer they're comfortable with, right? So the things that tend to take over the top positions, IBM skills and modernizing applications, have been moving up relatively because those are areas where clients really need help. And for the first time ever in the top 5, artificial intelligence shows up. And it was under 10% just 2 years ago. So there is a lot of focus in our IBMI community on how am I going to incorporate AI? And I'm sure some of that is coming from just everybody's thinking that in the industry, right? So that's where I'm not as concerned about cybersecurity dropping to #2. It's probably always going to be in that top 5 because it's so critical. But I'm glad to see that people want to address some of those other things and that we have invested to help them in security and HA, but also in skills and modernizing, right? That we drive a lot of our decisions based on what are the biggest issues our customers are facing.
Very good. Timothy, what are your thoughts on this chart?
Well, I mean, I've watched, you know, AI move to the left, and I always like to see when people are, when I see reduce IT spending moving to the right. So that means the economy is doing okay, people think it's doing okay, and they believe it, and they're investing in the platform. I think the other thing to think about is that AI is going to help address IBM skills and modernizing applications. I'm not so sure about cybersecurity directly on the IBMI platform, but in general, it absolutely is being used to help to bolster security. So it's hard to even separate these things looking forward. I have no problem believing that next year AI will be #3 and it'll be #2 after that, like, you know, 2 surveys from now. But, you know, IBM is only just beginning to give customers the tools. And frankly, Steve, I think Bob is a much broader effort than what IBM was initially going to do. And I don't know how the stuff you guys were doing in Rochester feeds into Bob, but I think to a great extent, I think we're going to end up with a much better set of AI tools that can help address the skill shortage, modernizing applications, and, you know, this all feed together in a virtuous cycle, perhaps. You know, I'm still a little cynical about AI absolutely understanding RPG and not spitting out garbage, but, you know, I'm hoping that way.
Well, we'll have to get you early access to it when it becomes officially available.
I wouldn't know the difference. I'm a basic and Fortran programmer. I wouldn't know RPG. I have other people I pay to pay attention to that.
This is going to be the great challenge of 2026 is Timothy Prickett Morgan turning out RPG code. Does it have to be free formatted, Steve?
It doesn't have to be, but it's better if it is.
Close enough to Java.
You know, let's transition from that little discussion to this next chart, right?
Yep.
what are your greatest IBMI skills challenges? This community has always been beset by this issue that IBMI skills are harder to find than other skills. We know that, right? That's the way it is. It's one of the reasons we try to make things as easy as we possibly can on this platform, so it's relatively easy to take a computer professional and teach them how to do things on IBMI. But we will be, with both our Bob offerings, the base Bob plus the stuff we're doing with IBMI, and with the agentic stuff that we're going to be adding to the operating system, it's going to be easier to take a person, whether they're a developer or an operator, who doesn't know a lot about the platform, and get them assistance from tools. And this is just the next evolution, right? We created Navigator and ACS so that if you don't know how to do the arcane commands from the AS400 days, you can still manage the system. You can still do SQL development, that sort of thing, right? Now we're going to have an evolutionarily better set of tooling in AI that will be able to let you get a new developer or get a new administrator who may not have experience, but they'll have assistance in doing those things. So certainly we will continue to work with the community to get lots of education, et cetera, but we can apply technology here now that will really help this sort of skill challenge issue. And it'll probably remain a challenge if what you really want is somebody with 10 years of experience on the platform.
Mm-hmm.
But if what you're looking for is a tool that can help anybody who's smart and wants to learn it work with the platform, well, we'll have those for you.
And
Yeah,
then I can program an RPG.
Yeah. Hey, Timothy, I had never programmed an RPG until this last year, and now I've done it with the help of Bob. So there you go.
So bad now.
So we're going to attack the skills challenge through AI, Bob, but there's still, there's that perceived group of IT professionals out there that just don't see IBMI as having resources available for them. And I think that that's probably more of almost like a political challenge that we have still going forward that we'll continue to battle.
That's fine. We just have more things we can battle it with. Yep.
Okay, that's great. We got more tools. All right, cool. And we have a few questions in the Q&A around that topic too, so be interesting. Hopefully we'll have time for that. I better get moving ahead here. The second item on the list was cybersecurity, and I just want to talk to the fact that it's really kind of good to see it not be number one, right? It means that people are addressing or feel like they've addressed their cybersecurity on IBMI. We know at Fortra, as being a cybersecurity company, that there are still a lot of customers out there that just think IBMI is good as is. Don't worry about cybersecurity. But exit point management, integration with system log technology, secure file transfer, the fact that MFA is in 7.6 and available from vendors too to help you out in implementing that. And then let's not forget about the fact that you can store any kind of object on IBMI, and the need for ransomware protection, antivirus protection is truly a thing. So it's good to see customers have adopted these technologies. There's probably still more that people can do in this space as we turn our attention to the future, and cybersecurity is not going to go away. So Kris, I know you guys probably hear a lot about cybersecurity challenges at Rochester. What are your thoughts on this one?
Absolutely. Security is one of our biggest investment areas and things that we have to do just to continue to go forward, and lots of things we're looking at in the future where, just the threats are constantly changing. That's something that we have to also be very concerned about. So we see that that's an interesting thing. I mean, the last chart was kind of more the native traditional ways to secure the platform, but we're looking at new ways with the quantum type computers and breaking things, new algorithms that are constantly changing to kind of protect yourself from those threats. And how do you have safeguarded copies? Safeguarded copies is actually probably one of the biggest things in the industry right now that I see. A lot of customers have embraced that concept of having air gap copies of your data and be able to recover from them. And I think that's a great thing. And now they're building automation, around recovery of that to kind of get back in a very quick standpoint. IBMI is set up nicely to kind of do that in a lot of ways, depending on your architecture. But we have the extremes. We kind of went to that at the beginning, where almost everything's running on the platform. Then we have people that are just running the database. But here's a plug for more integration. The more stuff you have on there, if you air gap that, the recovery is faster. So we have some stories around recovery from.
Well, and visiting customers this year and talking about cybersecurity, where they had the rest of the enterprise had ransomware was down. The one thing that kept them in business was IBMI.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
We've got more than one story like that. But again, you can't just put your head in the sand and assume everything's going to be okay, because these challenges and the threats are changing, and the knowledge around it is also an issue when we talk about skills. And the other thing that initially I always tell people, if it wasn't for bad actors, we would still have regulations still in many of the industries that we with publicly traded companies and credit card information and all those things. You still have regulations, and it's always interesting to see the mix of that. Almost 20% of the customers who took the survey, though, really don't have any regulations that they have to adhere to. So let's move into applications and development languages and things like that. And Steve, what are your thoughts on the various applications running on IBMI?
So people who've watched this or looked at the survey for years expect that the biggest number we're going to see there is in-house written applications. This is one of the reasons why application modernization is such a focus for us, helping clients modernize, because even though the vast majority of our clients do have some package or multiple packages that they've gotten from vendors, something like 3/4 of our clients have things that they still need to do specifically for how they use those applications and that data and so on. So we are absolutely still driven by those packages that people do purchase to run their businesses, whether it's manufacturing, banking, healthcare, whatever, okay? We have hundreds and hundreds of vendors out there who make their living on IBMI, or at least partially on IBMI. But we also know that we have tens of thousands of clients who are writing and maintaining their applications. And so we got to focus on helping them.
Tim, your thoughts on applications?
Well, we had an early history of open source software in the third-party software community, and that got us in this mess. And it allowed, but the great thing is it allowed people to get third-party software and heavily modify it and customize it, and it effectively becomes their own. And I think that's one of the reasons why that 73 or 75 or whatever it is, we've seen it over the years, percent of the base characterizes it as homegrown. But it's a unique base, and I love that these people write their own code. Yeah. How retro, how wonderful to control your own fate. I believe in that. And it's funny to me that the very companies that will try to convince you not to do that are the ones who insist on doing it themselves. Like a Google, a Microsoft, right? They whatever. But I say go for it. Control your fate.
There you go. Steve, I know your development is your number one interest, I think. What do you think about the development languages on IBMI?
Well, all the investment that we've put into making it possible for people to write modern RPG code and use it in modern ways, in clouds, in services, et cetera, has allowed people to continue to use that as their number one language. But we focus also on enabling those sort of center languages, the ones that come from the open source space, plus our traditional COBOL users. I'm glad to see that people who do use RPG are primarily using it in very modern ways, so that's good. And again, the AI that we are going to be putting out there in the marketplace, and we aren't the only ones, right? I talk about Bob and what we're doing there, but there are plenty of people out there who are helping clients do the more modern RPG. So that's great to see.
All right, let's speaking of open source, I think Timothy brought that up here just a little bit ago. So Steve, what are your thoughts on open source and IBMI?
So the first and most important thing is that when we talk about open source, people do not realize how much open source we use to do IBMI itself. So 100% of you are using open source when you're using the platform. That's just
What?
no doubt about it.
You didn't tell me that before.
But I understand the way people are thinking about this question is there something specifically from the open source world that I and my business have done? And so it's good to see more and more people doing it. I know every year we look at what those other write-ins are when we decide whether we're going to change this, with you guys, look at whether we're going to change this question to add more options. It's just a matter of clients becoming more and more confident in it. And to that extent, and to that end, we're trying to create more offerings where open source software can have support through IBM and our partners, so that you can be more and more confident that even though it's an open source product, you will be able to count on getting problems solved.
Yeah, Steve, if we too roll into the application developer tools too, if you don't mind commenting on this one too.
Yeah, so we've tried to push people to doing major development with modern tools, and that's why RDI got created those many years ago. We're investing in the open source tool base of Visual Studio Code because there are so many clients out there who have programmers who are using VS Code developers. That is, developers who came from the world of doing VS Code, and so we're making sure that we're supporting that environment as well. Fortunately, when I talk to people, most of the people who are still using the SEU and PDMs are doing it for small changes that they need to do really quickly. We're trying to make it as easy as possible for those people to also use the modern tools to do it. But for doing major projects, they're using the more modern tools.
Very true. All right, Tim, over to you on AI capabilities. What are you seeing in the industry?
Well, I think in the broader industry, I think we got two different forces going on. We have obviously the model builders spending enormous amounts of money, OpenAI, Anthropic, and then I guess Microsoft is doing some model building of its own, AWS, Google, Meta. They're basically these machines they're buying represent half of server spending, and it's going from we were at $120 billion a quarter in the last 2 quarters for server spending, and the dot-com boom was under 20 billion, just to give you a scale, and we're heading towards 200 billion by the end of the decade. So that's the kind of spending we're talking about. It is, to use a technical term, absolutely freaking insane. So that's the one side. So the other side are people who are looking at APIs and playing around with the models that are being built to try to figure out how useful is this thing. What we haven't seen a lot of is regular old enterprises picking a model, dropping it in, and seeing how to, having experimented, integrating it with their application. Some are relying, as we've seen in other surveys that we've done here as part of this survey, they're just waiting for their third-party application provider, Oracle, whoever, to add that AI functionality into their stack, and they're willing to wait for it because they know they're over their heads. This is too expensive, whatever. So what we haven't seen is people adopting it. And I think this might be the breakout year where that begins. We've got not just Bob, but integrated acceleration function that's inside the security perimeter of the power systems the first time. And that matters because security, the only security you have is an air gap. The fact that we're all talking about air gapping means that the other stuff really isn't good. It means, and with quantum decryption or whatever it's called, where anybody can crack any code anytime, when we get to that moment, of course we're all going to have to air gap stuff because it's the only way. You're going to have to air gap like supercomputers checkpoint. So I look forward to seeing how this is going to be truly adopted and change the applications. The operating system is already being changed. So it'll be interesting to see how much of this function that we do in the IBMI platform can be automated to some degree with AI. So that's how I look at that. That didn't really speak to this chart, but that's what I think is important to consider.
Well, I just moved ahead because of time a little bit. I don't want to run out of time. So over to you, Kris, to talk about AI and what IBM sees.
Yeah, so this chart's great because it kind of mirrors what we're seeing and what our plan is. But AI is a very broad topic, and you're going to see us doing some very bleeding edge type things, and you're going to see us doing some stuff that's integrated straight into the operating system. And so you're going to be using AI whether you want to or not. You kind of see that already, like my storage box, Flash Systems has automated ransomware detection that uses AI models to detect if ransomware is attacking your disk drive. And so you're going to start to see that more in these topics, and those topics match exactly to the skills concerns. And so that's the great thing of all these technologies around AI that we can utilize to kind of solve multiple things, and they align with what people want to use them for. So 2026 is going to be a very exciting year for IBMI and AI, and I think it's going to be hard to keep up with all the things that we're doing, which is great because, like I said, some things are going to come out, bleeding edge, and some things are going to, be more integrated, standardized, built into the operating system. So very exciting area.
Yeah, thank you, Kris. And speaking of something that's been happening on this platform for a long time is automation, and you'll see nearly 3/4 of the survey respondents are running their system fully unattended, which is really exciting to see after a long career here at Help Systems Fortra, where we specialize in automation, to see that number that high. It is a platform that can be highly automated. Let's move ahead and talk about critical platforms and what IBM does. And Steve, I think that's up to you.
Yeah, so this just represents the kind of thing we see from our clients. When they're using IBMI, it's for a critical part of their business. And for most of our clients, it is either all or most of what they do most critically helps them. And so that's one of the reasons why our clients tend to look at us as, we are their mainframe, and they're not going to leave us because we run their business, right? We have the value. Yep.
And then, when we started the survey many years ago, it was, oh boy, what are we going to see about people leaving the platform? And so, Tim, what are we seeing?
We see this chart not being true every year. There are people that leave the platform. There are companies that merge, and we lose the battle with the Oracle suite of applications, compared to homegrown apps. It does happen. But if this chart was true for the last 12 years, we wouldn't be having this conversation today because there would be no base. So we know it's not true. And I understand that the IBMI platform is different, and that it is always something that can be kind of picked on. But it is also very difficult to take a machine that encapsulates all the processes of your business and take on an enormous amount of risk just to get rid of it. To do what? To buy 10 Windows servers or 10 Linux servers to replace it? It's a bad proposition on the face of it. So I think there's a lot of pressure on the platform at all times because it's different. But because it's different in its own way, and it's valuable in its own way, and has great ROI, it's very difficult to actually go through the process of getting rid of that platform.
Yeah. And because that leaving wedge is always bigger than it really is going to turn out to be, the wedge that says increase our IBMI footprint is not given as much weight as it ought to be. We continue to be a growing business inside of IBM because people are putting more and more of their workload, trusting IBMI more and more. So yeah, as you said, Timothy, the part of people leaving doesn't end up being represented truthfully here, and it ends up hiding the fact that our committed clients end up putting more and more workload on IBMI, which is good for all of us because it means our future is secure.
Very good. Steve, what's your thought on the return on investment graph that we put out every year?
This is why we integrate what our clients ask for so heavily. It's why we talk to our client base so much, because we want to make sure that the next things they need, the next things that provide value to their investment, are going to be coming from IBMI. And it's always heartening to see this number be so high.
Amazing. Kris, first time you're seeing this. Well, obviously you've looked at the, but in the webinar, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, just like Steve said, it's very. This is why we do it. That people are seeing the value, and there's other studies that back up this, and it's glad that actual customers are responding in this way. So hopefully, that means their investments will continue to go forward.
Yeah, puts a smile on everyone's face in Rochester, I have to believe, even on a cold -10-degree day.
Exactly. Yes.
All right, let's move ahead and talk a little demographics before we wrap this thing up. I just like to point out this is a worldwide survey. It is not just US customers. We have customers from all over the globe that are answering this survey from all different size organizations. You can see that in the results here. I don't need to go through all the numbers, but it is very well-rounded, I guess is probably a way of saying it. And then we also have a variety of professionals that answer it. It's not just the developer or the administrator who spends their entire life on IBM I. It is leadership and even C-level type leadership that respond to the survey. Let's talk a little bit about administrators and developers here. Kris, we got just a few moments on that.
So yeah, this gets back to that ROI. What always surprises me is, some very large companies have very few staff and administrators for this platform, which is, a great story, and it's actually a bad story in some ways because they get outnumbered, I think, in their corporations is kind of my observation, but it does speak to the ROI and how we try and design it to hit this exact target. So, that's great to see that you can drive, billions of transactions with very few people managing the system.
Yeah. And I know, Steve, we were going to have you comment on the industries, but it's pretty obvious here again that IBM I serves many different industries, and people forget about where it is. I'm always amazed. I find that homegrown software in some industry that I never dreamed of before, and it's running some, dog show or something like that. It's amazing. So we want to thank you for joining us. You heard earlier there was 315 people who took the survey this year. The ROI stays very high in IBM I. IBM I Skills, however, is #1 this year over security. I think that reflects that continued need for education and bringing new people into the platform. The platform's not going away. It's a great place to start your career. We see a lot of people on Power 10 and Power 11 now these days, and people are staying relevant on the latest operating systems with over 81% on 7.4, 7.5, and 7.6 as we combine those. And then, of course, from a modernizing development, we heard about AI today, we heard about Bob, but we also have RDI and Visual Studio Code out there as options for people. I also like to remind people about the resources that are out there for you, from podcasts to education sessions at Common and the various newsletters around the world, along with local user groups that keep you up to date on the IBM platform. So I'm always amazed. So where do we go for education? I get that question all the time. And my gosh, I mean, I know at Common, if you're a member of Common, you get the developer boot camps, you get the administrator boot camps, security boot camps. There's a lot of education that's available online, or just go to Common and you will get that. Last polling question before we roll into a few of the questions that we have out there. So let me just launch that. It's just basically, how can Fortra help you? And feel free, if you want a free security scan from us, you want a discussion around high availability DR, document management, business intelligence, or automating your computers, feel free to take that. Let's roll into a few questions while I leave that polling question out there. One of them out there was, hey, I just upgraded to Power 10. Does that mean I have to go to Power 11? How long can I stay on Power 11? Anybody want to take that?
Well, if you just moved to Power 10, you'll be good there for quite a while. We don't make the old generation of Power go away just because we have a new one. You'll want to look at whether Power 11 makes sense for you, or if you're going to wait for whatever follows Power 11. But yeah, you're not on old stuff just because you're on Power 10, that's for sure.
Let's see. IBM skills is a big concern for my clients. How can I get help to address this? I'm an ISV in this marketplace. It's the big elephant for us. And I know this particular ISV has customers all over the globe. What should they be looking at from an education standpoint?
Well, first of all, please go and Google and find that seminar that we talked about right at the beginning, because we're trying, between IBM and the community and partners around the world, we're trying to make as many educational opportunities available as possible. And then please pay attention to what we're going to be doing this year in the AI space. AI isn't the only answer to anything, because getting to know or helping your clients to find other IBMi clients who have the same problems as your clients, that's the biggest step. Most people in most technical jobs do not come out of school knowing the specific technologies that they need, whatever platform they're going to be, right? So they need to work with other people who are doing the same kind of thing to build up those skills. And we have an exceptional community at being able to help people find other people doing the same things. There's a lot of community learning that happens, and it is honestly, other than on-the-job training, the best way to do things.
Yeah, one of the comments I had was, how come gaming industry is zero when I know a lot of the casinos run on IBMi?
It really has to do with who answers the survey. We know, we know they're out there.
Yeah, good one, Steve. That's exactly what I was going to say. People want to know how many Fortra customers have moved to the IBM cloud, and honestly, I don't know. The funny thing is when you're running in the cloud or whether you're running on premise, our software runs the same way. So we really don't know, other than you're running on a different serial number and a different partition with different processors and maybe a different operating system. I don't know how else to answer that one. And then I tried to get a tech update schedule with Fortra, but the link was broken. Does Fortra still do that? Yes, we do still do tech updates, and really what that is basically executive briefing. So we'll do that with your team at any point in time. Can you share the link that Steve just mentioned about the education offering? I can, if I find my browser. Oh, I don't have that up anymore. I apologize. I don't, but it's on Tech Channel, so it's very easy to find that on Tech Channel. That's where I would go for that survey information. So, okay. All right, with that said, I want to thank our presenters today. Kris, first time, we would have never guessed. You did an outstanding job. Thank you very much. Timothy, as always, we enjoy your insight from outside the industry, inside the industry, and your predictions for the future. I appreciate that. And Steve, Will, always insightful on what's happening at Rochester. So thank you guys so much. You all have a wonderful day. And
all right, thanks everybody.
Thank you so much.
thank you. Bye-bye.